Welcome back to Under the Radar, a show about independent iOS development. I am Marco Arment.
And I'm David Smith. Under the Radar is never longer than 30 minutes, so let's get started. Our goal for Under the Radar is for it to be a show that covers all of the various aspects of what it means to be a developer, whether that independent or working in a corporate job. We want to talk a lot about all the various things that are important to people who are in development jobs. And so in our first episode, we talked about something that was more business-oriented. Then we talked about something more coding last week. This week, we're going to take a slightly softer topic. But our goal is to kind of make sure that we're covering a lot of things and we're not just diving into one thing too much. And hopefully that makes it a lot more interesting and a bit more varied to listen to. And so this week, we're going to talk about making your ideal work environment and what that looks like for us, the experiences we've had in setting that up, as well as just kind of like things that you should be thinking about. Because being a developer is kind of a funny job. We go to work by sitting, we go into an office, whatever that looks like. We sit down in a chair and we push buttons on a keyboard and a mouse. And at the end of that, out comes some code, and that's our profession. But as a result, the way in which we spend our time when we're sitting for 40, 50, 60 hours a week or whatever your particular work environment looks like, the way in which we do that is very important, because if it doesn't make us the most productive, we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot. And along those lines, there's also things like ergonomics and problems with RSI and things that I know I myself have worried about and have had some problems with that I wanted to sort of dive into. But so Marco, what is your current ideal work environment look like?
So basically, I've set up my home office because I work only from home. I don't have any other offices that I go to or work from, and that's a whole other topic that we might be able to get to today, but we'll certainly talk about in the future. I have a desk that I didn't quite steal it. I negotiated it as part of my exit from Tumblr, which is an electrically raising and lowering desk. I love having the standing desk because a while ago I developed some pretty bad back problems. I was taking way too many road trips and was basically spending way too much time in cars over a span of about a year. And so I eventually developed lower back problems. I had a herniated disc and everything. So in order to avoid that and to kind of fix that, I had to make a bunch of changes in my life, one of which was for almost a year, I think, I exclusively stood while working. And at first, I had rigged this up by stacking 2 six-packs stacked with IKEA bookshelves spanning across them. So it ends up that is about the height difference that you can put a keyboard and mouse on, and then another set of those on the back for the monitor to kind of make a makeshift standing desk from one that is normally a sitting desk. And then eventually we decided to make it official and get really nice electric ones because everyone else in the office wanted them too. And it's nice to be able to convert easily back and forth between standing and sitting. So you can do things like stand in the morning, and then when you're tired in the afternoon, you can sit for the afternoon. It's nice to have that kind of variety if you have any kind of back problem, and it's also just probably slightly better for you. There's various studies, most of which are conflicting and inconclusive, like most studies, but yeah, it's probably a good thing to mix standing with sitting in your day if you can, however, whatever form that takes. I also had RSI scares earlier. So a long time ago, I switched from regular, kind of keyboards to the split ergonomic keyboard layout. Originally, it was the Microsoft Natural something 4000, and I used those for a long time. It's a great keyboard. And then a couple years ago now, or maybe one or 2 years ago now, they released the Microsoft Sculpt ergonomic keyboard, which is kind of an update to it. And it's another split ergo keyboard, and I like it a lot. I reviewed it on my site. I'll add links to show notes. You can see all these. I've tried other ergonomic keyboards as well, including the Kinesis Freestyle 2 and the Matius Ergo Pro, and they're both very good as well. I still prefer the Sculpt, but anyway, switching to an Ergo keyboard really was one of the biggest things to help me with RSI issues. And after that switch, I no longer have any pain almost ever. Since, 10 years ago when I made that switch, I have occasionally tried to switch back to a non-split keyboard, or I've gone on trips where I have to bring a laptop and I'm using a laptop keyboard more heavily than usual. And every time I switch to a non-split keyboard, even for a few days, I do start getting pain again. And so now I know about myself that this is just something that I will probably not be able to ever switch back to full time to the regular layout, which of course has, a lot of interesting ramifications with things like working from iPads and stuff like that. But my physical layout is Standing desk, most of which I usually am sitting at it these days. I don't stand often anymore, but sometimes I'll put it up to stands. But most of the time I'm sitting. I'm sitting on a Herman Miller Embody chair. Get a good chair. How many chairs do you buy in your life? Like, really? Well, if you do my previous method of buying them from Staples and they're like $60, then the number might be pretty high. But when you get a good chair, you tend to keep it for like 10 years at least. The Herman Miller Embody is great. The Aeron is also very good. I think the Embody's better, but it's up to you. Go to a fancy chair store and try them out. But yeah, that's basically it. Standing desk, Herman Miller Embody chair, and split keyboard, and the Apple Magic Mouse, which everybody hates.
Yeah. I was about to actually say, it's like I have a very similar setup. I have the same chair and keyboard, but mouse-wise, what I found is actually gaming mice are really great for development work, which is a funny thing to say because like they're all kinds. I mean, I think the mouse I have is this thing. It's like the Razer Death Adder 8000 or something. Like, I mean, they always have these very scary sounding names. Like it's something terrifying. But is
it full of blue LEDs?
I had a choice. I could get a model with or without the LED, and I opted to get the non-LED version, just for stylistic reasons. But
yes.
What I love about a mouse like that, though, is it has an incredibly light touch on the buttons. Because obviously, if you're playing some kind of first-person shooter and you're, clicking that button lots and lots of times, and you need a very light trigger. It's sort of like it has a feather trigger on it, which which I found to be really nice. Versus like the Apple mice, I have a whole like closet of them because they you get one every time you buy an iMac.
Yep.
But I've never used one because they're just it feels like I'm trying to like. I don't even know. It's like hold on to this bar of soap or something. Like it's clenching my hand in a really awkward way. So, but otherwise, yeah, I have a very similar setup for you with you. As I have a desk that I have a desk that I got the IKEA standing desk. So it has like the motor thing, and it's like the IKEA thing. It was a couple $100, I think. It wasn't all that expensive. I've never used it standing. I got it when I needed a new desk, and I was like, well, I'm going to pay the few extra $100 to get a standing mode so that if I need to at some point or it becomes something that I want to do, I can. I've always found standing to feel a bit awkward. Like, I don't know if I just feel like I've gotten so used to, I sit down when I work and like breaking the habit of like sitting down and standing up doesn't feel like working, which is, I mean, might be a bit weird, but I have it there just in case. Of course, the other amusing thing about my working setup that I wanted to mention is the thing that I've seen most people who end up complaining about problems with ergonomics or problems. In my experience, it's one of two things. They're using a regular keyboard and they need to try using a split keyboard. Or their screen is too low down. Because for some reason, I don't really know who Apple is designing their computers for. All of their computers, most specifically the iMac or the Cinema displays, the stands are ridiculously short. The computer is only, if you just put it on its own stand, it would be like 4 or 5 inches above the table. And for almost every, unless you have a very strangely proportioned torso, that means that you're going to be looking down at the screen all day. And that's terrible for you. Like, it's sort of, I noticed this myself whenever I have to, like, I'm forced to work from a laptop for more than a few hours. Because typically I never use a laptop except for like when I'm at, like at a conference for a week or WWDC, something like that, where I have to use a laptop. But I immediately notice like my shoulders get all tight. I'll start to get like pain in my neck and all kinds of things because you're looking down. So for me, I don't even know if I should say this, but I'm kind of a hoarder of Apple packaging. So every Apple device I've ever bought, I have the packaging for still. But so my iMac is stacked on a MacBook Pro box, which and then on top of that is an iPad box, and it's sort of laid. It's sort of put on there, and then I have a strap over it to keep it together. But it raises it up by maybe about 6 inches or so, and for me that's perfect. So that like the one thing I remember. When I think it was back when I was in college, I had this random mandatory class that all the computer science majors had to take. That was basically like how to not end up hurting yourself being a software engineer. And they were talking about all these things about ergonomics and about like how you like work life types of things. But the biggest thing I remember they said is like, would you want to look when you set up your work environment, there should be no tension in any part of you. Like everything should be neutral. Like your elbows should be at a nice 90-degree angle. Your shoulders should be relaxed. Your legs should be at a nice 90-degree angle. Like nothing should be in tension. And the only way I've ever been able to do that is to lift my iMac up, put my keyboard at normal, and this is actually a nice thing about having a standing desk, is you can make your table height whatever you want. So like my table height is nice and low. And for me, I found that to work really well.
Yeah, definitely. And that's this is one of the worries I have about our industry in general, but although this problem usually kind of solves itself through force, through RSI and neck and shoulder problems, is that it seems like the default developer workstation has shifted over the last 10 years. It used to be a desktop computer, but now I think for almost every working developer that I've encountered in real life, they're almost always working on a laptop full time.
It's the 15-inch MacBook Pro, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
that's what everyone has.
That is like the workhorse computer. It's not the new MacBook One. It's not the MacBook Air. It isn't even the 13. The most common computer by far that I see developers using is the 15-inch MacBook Pro. And even if they're like web developers, even if they're not even iOS developers, even if they're web developers or something else, it's a 15-inch MacBook Pro almost always. But the problem is so many developers work full time on a laptop sitting on a desk without external stuff, just like on the laptop itself. And, if it's somebody I know who I wouldn't mind, ribbing a bit, I'll ask them, so by any chance, do you have like neck and shoulder soreness or problems? Because hunching over a laptop is really not good long term, as you said. Like you really should be looking straight ahead. You should be looking you should be typing on a keyboard that is, by proper ergonomics, the keyboard needs to be fairly far from the screen. So it's kind of impossible to get good ergonomics out of a laptop. If you have a laptop and you're working at the same desk every day, the setup I did for years when I was working on a laptop was you'd have the external keyboard, mouse, and monitor. And the laptop would be propped up on a stand next to it. So the laptop would be the second monitor. The external monitor would be the primary. And then you'd have the keyboard and mouse so you can simulate a really nice desktop by using a laptop with external peripherals and a stand. And if you're going to be working on a laptop full time, that is by far the setup I recommend, because you get double the screen space. You don't have to deal with the weirdness of the laptop working in clamshell mode, which is never good. That's always a hack. It's always unreliable. There's occasionally some heat issues or some melting the screen issues.
It's not good.
No, it's not reliably good. But having the side by side on a stand setup is great. And if you have to work on a laptop full time, that is the way to do it ergonomically. And I wonder about how this ends up working with, like, if we have a future where we're working more on iOS devices. The smartphone, I'm not too worried about the ergonomics of smartphones, but that might also have the kind of like neck looking down issue. I am a little concerned about what happens if we get really into tablets as an industry of like working on tablets, because you use your hands on a tablet keyboard the way you would on a desktop keyboard. Like on a smartphone, you're using your thumbs. You're not.
Yeah.
So it's a whole different position. And a smartphone, I don't think would be fatiguing in the same way, because of like the way you're holding it in your hand seems like a very natural position for your hand to be in.
Yeah, your fingers are fairly neutral.
Exactly. On a small tablet, you're probably doing the same thing. On a big tablet, you might be doing on-screen typing, touch typing style, or you might be using an external keyboard. And that, I think, is going to have ergonomic challenges similar to what laptops have, if not a little bit worse, because everything's a little bit more cramped. And we don't yet know the long-term ergonomics of these things. We've had computers, like PC-style computers. We've had those for decades to be able to study the ergonomics of long-term use and the effects of this use. We've had so much time to study this and to figure out, good ergonomic practices on this and what's good and what's not. With all these new devices that we have, they're just too young. We just haven't had the time yet to figure out, like, what happens ergonomically if you work on a tablet for 10 hours a day for 10 years. Like, we just don't know yet. And I'm a little scared if the industry moves more towards these things, that actually makes it harder to get good ergonomics. Because, like, the world of desktops and laptops and PCs, every person can kind of pick what works for them and mix and match, and there's tons of availability of things you can do. Keyboards you can use, mice you can use, arrangements of the setup, kinds of setups. There's all this variety. As we move towards these kind of all-in-one integrated devices and iPads and phones and everything, I feel like the amount of variety possible is substantially smaller. As we keep moving towards everything must be as small and thin and light as possible, small and thin and light are often in conflict with good ergonomics. Which is one of the problems Apple has with the design of its product. And as you mentioned, the whole reason the iMac and Cinema Display stand is so short is because it looks worse when it's taller. Like, it doesn't look as nice. And that's why it's short, to make it look better. And oftentimes proper ergonomics don't look that good. It's always this balance that has to be struck. And I hope by talking about it here, I think my main hope is that people, especially young people, for whom like it's not too late yet, like I hope that people really take seriously their own ergonomics, because the problems can accumulate quickly. You know, like I first had RSI pain after only about a year and a half of working full time as a programmer. I was like 23 or something. I was very young still, and it came on immediately. Like it was so quick. I developed my back problem when I was only like 25. You know, like this stuff can happen when you're young, and the earlier you catch it, the better. And the earlier you develop good habits, the better.
Yeah, and I had a similar experience. Like, very early on in my career, I discovered that if I typed especially if after like a session where like you really get in the zone and like you're really working, and like you have the thing where the days where you look up and it's like, wow, I've just been sitting in exactly the same position for 5 hours straight. Like, I haven't moved because I've been so focused on what it is I'm building, which is awesome, like from a development perspective. But then I'd like get up and it's like, ow, like that, like it hurts. And then you start to have the thoughts of, it's like, if I can't type, like I can't do my job. Like it's a kind of one of those scary, like, disability type of things. Like if I ended up hurting myself, like it would be like my hands are what I use to make to do my work. Like I can't, there's not really, I mean, I'm sure that I could work out ways around it, but it's such a vital thing. And like you said, it's like, the reason I wanted this early topic for me is it's like, it's an important thing. Like it's one of the few things that as a profession, like professionally, you have to take care of yourself with, because if you lose the ability to type, or to type without, to type comfortably, like it's going to be a pretty serious problem.
And all of these types of pain, whether it's like wrist style pain or neck and shoulder or back pain, all of those things come on very slowly and then leave very slowly. These aren't like, oh, I'm sore for one day and then it's normal. They could last weeks or months, and it's over weeks or months that the bad habits get built and that the problem gets exacerbated. Again, they come on slowly and they leave slowly. So it is important, like feeling any wrist or neck or back pain is not normal. Like if you feel any of that pain after any day, you're doing something wrong. And so there's always room for improvement. You know, the more you move around during the day, you'll help your back. How you sit, if you sit like with good posture, that helps a lot. How you use or don't use arm rests and wrist rests. If you have a keyboard, please use a split keyboard if you can. If you can't or refuse to, at minimum, please do not use the feet on the back of the keyboard that elevate it up, because that is working against you so hard. Any keyboard you type on should be either flat or should actually be what they call negative tilted, which is that the front of it should be higher than the back, which no keyboard has that option that I know of except natural keyboards to do that. That is like the more comfortable and better for RSI angle that a keyboard should be at. The feet on the back that prop it up that all of us used like in the 90s and 2000s because we didn't know any better, if you're typing upwards on a keyboard that's the back of it is higher than the front, you're actually making your wrist tilt in a horrible position that can really exacerbate problems and bring on RSI faster. And this, it's just like this kind of basic stuff like this. A lot of people just don't know this. Like if you have a properly aligned keyboard and you have your monitor at the correct height and your desk is at the correct height, even if you don't have a fancy electric raising and lowering desk, you can probably adjust the legs on your desk to different heights. Most desks have that. Having the proper height of everything, just the basics of that is so important, and it goes so far. And for many people, myself included, these minor changes or caring about these few minor areas, that's all you need to prevent RSI. And I don't know what my future holds, but I know I've been able to work now full time for 10 years at least, and I only had RSI issues that first year, and only until I made these changes, and now I'm fine. So really, they can have a big difference.
And one thing that's also probably worth mentioning is, in my experience, like I haven't had a corporate job in a long time, but whenever I did, anytime I went to my boss and said, hey, I'm having some RSI-related things, could I get a different keyboard? Could I get a different stand for my laptop? Like every time they fall over themselves to take care of it for me, because from their perspective, it sounds like a horrible workers' comp liability situation.
Right.
If all of a sudden it's like, so I was working, doing the job with the equipment you provided for me, and now I'm unable to work, like that's their problem in a pretty serious way.
Yeah, and this stuff isn't expensive.
Yeah, and if you're independent, it's like spend the money on this. Like I remember when I was first starting out, like buying a chair that was like, like I don't even know, like an embodied chair is at least $1,000.
Yeah, I think it's like $1,300 or something.
Yeah, it's like it's an expensive thing when you're starting out. But it's like if I don't get a good chair, like I'm just gonna end up regretting it later. It's like it's kind of one of these things that you have to just sort of invest in because you're going to spend so many hours sitting in this chair every day.
Yeah, and we're not saying that the only good chair is $1,300, but when you spend good money in this area to get something really, really good, that is a good use of money. So it's not like totally required that you can't get any work done until you spend $2,000 on your physical office setup or whatever. But it is money well spent if you can. And stuff like a natural keyboard, I mean, a natural keyboard's like $50. Like it's not a ton of money compared to a computer. So that kind of stuff, changing your monitor height can usually be free. If you can find some Apple boxes that haven't been thinned out too much, that can usually be free. Stuff like that. These small changes, putting down those stupid stands on the back of your keyboard is also free. Like most of the stuff you can do very easily. This episode of Under the Radar is brought to you by NS Screencast. NS Screencast features short, focused screencasts on iOS development. Every week, you're going to find a new, fantastically produced episode that will help you build and enhance your development skills. Now, you can watch these videos on NS Screencast's site at nsscreencast.com. You can also watch them from the comfort of your couch with their brand new Apple TV app. All this costs just $9 a month or $100 a year, with team plans available too. And you can go there right now. Go to nsscreencast.com/firstcrack to get 30% off your first month. And they have a whole bunch of videos up there that you can watch for free. So you can see what it is like, what their videos are like. They're very high quality videos. And then when you pay, you have access to the full library, not just the free ones. And they are such high quality videos.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention something from my own experience that was very similar to NS Screencast. Like, NS Screencast is an awesome tool, and it reminded me a lot of actually of the way in which back in the day, I learned how to program on Ruby on Rails, which is, there was a similar thing for Rails development called Railscast. Originally, I remember being a little timid, just sort of like sign up for things and like buy videos. It's like, come on, I can like read the documentation, I'll be fine. But I remember one of these things that I found when I and ultimately, like eventually I bit the bullet, I signed up, and I found that it was compressing dramatically the time it took for me to learn something. Because watching somebody else who knows what they're doing show you how to do the thing that you're trying to learn is just so much more powerful and effective from a time perspective than ever sort of slogging through it yourself. Or maybe eventually you'll get there, but from an efficiency perspective, from a respecting your own time perspective, something like this, a resource like this, is very powerful.
Thank you so much to NS Screencast. Go to nsscreencast.com/firstcrack for 30% off your first month. Thanks a lot to NS Screencast for sponsoring the show and Relay FM.
All right. And I think the last sort of topic along our ideal work environment, it seemed like we couldn't sort of wade into this topic without at least slightly touching on the things that we listen to while we code. Because I think one of the most universal things about programmers is if you go into an office, if you're trying to find where the development team is, it's always the group of people just in a line wearing headphones. That there's something about developers that we just love to listen to things. And I know your headphone tastes are quite refined. But I was just curious, what do you normally listen to, and how does that go for you when you're developing?
I mean, to me, it's all about isolation, right? And that's why developers wear headphones while they're working most of the time if they're working in an office, because you need quiet, you need isolation so you can concentrate. And private offices are probably way better for this. I don't know. I've never worked in one. But the open plan, which is where I think most developers find themselves working these days, is so hard to get any work done if you don't have some kind of isolating headphones with music playing. So I think working in silence is probably better if you could actually get silence. But in the absence of that option, when you're working in an open plan, the best thing you can do is, first of all, if you can help it, find a seat or a desk that does not face the door, so that as people come in and out, you aren't constantly visually distracted. But yes, also then when you're listening to, put headphones on, block out the sound, and put on something. And I don't really care what it is. What helps the most is if you put on music that you don't have to really think about for a while. So, like, shuffle is bad, because if you're shuffling through your whole music library, you're going to have these constant jarring transitions between songs, and there's going to be some songs that come on that you don't want to hear right now, so you're going to have to skip them, and all of that is distracting. What I like to do is put on something that it's going to play straight through, no shuffle, long shows or long albums that are going to play straight through, that I already know, so I'm not going to have to think about it, and that won't be distracting, and that will provide a nice constant level of noise, not something super quiet that will not be as good as blocking out the sound. And for me, that is Fish. Lots and lots of Fish, for many reasons that I've talked about a lot in other places, so I'm not going to go too far into it here. First of all, I just like it, but second of all, Fish provides these live show sales. Every concert they do, you can buy it as a live show. It's nice because it's just different enough each time that it doesn't feel like you're listening to the same album on repeat, but it's the same enough that they're still the same songs generally that you know, so it's the same enough that it isn't super distracting, and they're long shows. You can buy hours and hours and hours of Fish shows every year, that new ones every year that come out. So it provides what I want, which is that kind of straight through playback of something that I can just jump in, hit play, and then not think about it for the next 3 hours as I work. And it's there, it's consistent, it's nice, I like it, I enjoy it, it's motivating for me, and it really serves to help me keep focused.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think I am so similar. Like, I like the isolation. I like kind of something to keep my mind. It's almost like I want to activate and have a certain part of my brain active that isn't my development part, but it keeps it busy, so I'm not thinking about it. For me, I listen to cheesy pop music, like as cheesy as can be, that's what I love, and I don't know why. I think like the peppiness of it is really helpful to me. But it's like you just got to find something that'll keep your brain engaged in what it's doing without being distracted by other things. And you just find it, you put it on, and then it's like, what does it say? You plug in and off you go.
Exactly. And because, we work in these long bursts. Programmers tend to work in these big chunks of time where, some people call it being in the zone, whatever you call it. This is generally how almost every program works that I've ever heard of or talked to. And so, like, you can't be in a constantly interrupted environment. You can't be, like, in an open environment where everyone's asking you questions every 5 minutes, or you have to get up constantly to go do something, or you have to keep going in and out of meetings all day. It's very hard to get good programming work done in that kind of environment. So anything you can do to keep yourself in the zone, keep yourself focused, usually is worth it. Good closed headphones. I'll put a link in the show notes to my favorite closed pair, which is only like $150. The Audio-Technica ATH M50X. And it's good closed headphones with good music that you like, that you don't have to think much about, that can last for a long time at moderate volume. Please don't blow your ears out, because that's another thing that does not grow back over time. So please keep it at moderate volume, just enough to block out the world, not enough to blast your ears out. Yeah, highly recommended. All
right, and I think that's it for today's show. Thank you so much for the warm reception you've given us so far. Recommend us in Overcast, and otherwise we'll see you again next week.
See you.